This is the first flight operated by Turkish Airlines to have departed Istanbul in almost 14 years. Now, this development comes after the fall of the Assad regime last year, and it's hoped that the resumption of this flight by Turkish Airlines to Damascus and potentially other cities in Syria will herald a new era in relations between the two countries as Syria looks to rebuild after years of war. Now, we know that the resumption of these flights is hoped to further forge people-to-people relations as well as economic ties. Now, the flight from Istanbul was scheduled to take off at 9 a.m. local time, but was delayed by almost an hour. And as you can see, it's just touched down in Damascus. Now, it's landing at Damascus International Airport, and in addition to the passengers, Turkish Airlines executives are also aboard the flight. Bilal Ekşi, who's the CEO of Turkish Airlines, announced that Turkish Airlines would resume these flights earlier this month after a meeting with the Syrian foreign minister. Direct flights between the two cities will be organised from Istanbul Airport and Damascus International Airports some 3 times a week initially, and the airline says it hopes to increase the frequency of those flights in the future. Well, let's go now to our correspondent Nizar Sadawi, who joins us from Damascus. Hi there, Nizar. A significant moment there for both Türkiye and Syria. We know that this has been almost 14 years in the making. Explain to us more the significance about these flights resuming between the two countries.
Well, Oscar, this is absolutely a significant milestone in terms of the Turkish-Syrian relationships. After a decade of for the past 14 years, not a single person here has seen anything related to Turkey, unfortunately, because of the Al-Assad regime that was still here. And of course, they didn't maintain any good relations with any neighboring country, especially Turkey. But now we have started to see the actual change with the revolutionaries taking power here, with the new administration that is trying to make sure, and they have said it loud and clear repeatedly. They want a great relationship with Türkiye. They said that Türkiye is the country that has stood by the Syrian people for 14 years. We've seen visits from Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. We've seen Asad al-Shaybani, the Syrian Foreign Minister, visiting Ankara lately. He even met with President Erdogan. And now, for the first time in 14 years, we are seeing a Turkish Airlines plane landing behind me here in Damascus International Airport. This is only the beginning of what is expected to be a new chapter in the relationship between Syria and Turkey. So this is, of course, also expected to bolster economic relations and political relations, as well as when it comes to people. We have to understand that we have nearly 3 million Syrians who were actually living in Turkey for the past 14 years because of Al-Assad regime. Now, not many of them have returned here, and even those who actually decided to return to Syria from Turkey, they have built lives in Turkey, and that's why it's very important to have a sustainable relationship in terms of air flights between the two countries.
Okay, Nizar Sadawi, we'll leave it there for now as we look at Turkish Airlines Flight 846, touchdown in Damascus after an almost 14-year absence. We can see there the flags of both Syria and Turkey flying there out of the cockpit. As Nizar was saying, a significant moment for both countries, particularly for Syria, as it looks to rebuild and forge growing ties with the international community after years of isolation under the Assad regime. Okay, we're going to return now to Nizar Sadawi. Nizar, as we continue to look at these pictures, it must be also a sense of relief among Syrians, not only in Turkey, but around the world, that now they have commercial flights back into Syria. Many of them can consider returning to the country that they left many years ago.
even if it comes to just visiting the country, Oscar, this is huge for Syrians. They have been forcibly displaced from their own homeland for 14 years, hundreds of thousands of people who are living in neighboring countries, especially Türkiye. All in all, we have millions of Syrians living abroad, especially in Türkiye, not just in Türkiye, but even in Europe. And these people, they can't just come here so easily, especially that the situation in Lebanon is not really stable. And even if they can come to Syria through Lebanon, it would be a drag. It won't be an easy trip for them. So the fact that there is an airport, an international airport working once again, the fact that they can just hop on a plane and come to their homeland, even for a short visit, that is huge. It's an overwhelming moment for all Syrians here. And we have started to see the impact of this, not just because of the Turkish airplane, but because of the fact that now Syria officially wise, they have a good, almost perfect relationship with Türkiye. This is something that Syrians have been longing for years because they didn't have that under al-Assad regime. Now, the most important country for them, Türkiye, a neighboring country that hosted millions of Syrians for years, is as close as it can be. And they even have planes going back and forth from Istanbul, from Gaziantep. We will see that very soon. And now it's just so easy for them. And it's also significant because they have started to maintain good relations with other countries as well. I mean, the idea of having an operational airport in itself is something very important for Syrians, whether the Syrian people or even the new administration, because we have to understand here that they have been focusing hugely on restoring diplomatic relations, lifting sanctions, maintaining good relations with every country in the world, not just the neighboring country. So the fact that we can actually see planes landing in Damascus International Airport now, and we will also see planes leaving, we have already. I mean, that is significant politically, diplomatically, and of course socially for people here.
Nizar, as we continue to look at these live pictures from Damascus, we can see there are a number of officials gathering on the tarmac as they prepared to welcome the passengers from TK Flight 846. This is, as you've been saying, a significant moment for the Syrian people and for Syrian emigres who were forced to leave the country under the Assad regime. Talk to us about what this means for the rebuilding of Syria, because we know that the country has been in isolation for more than a decade, and these aerial links are finally reopening. This will no doubt have a significant impact on the reconstruction of the country.
Oh, absolutely. Look, in terms of the politics here, let's just talk about politics. You cannot have a new government, a new administration that does not own or control an operational airport. This is actually significant because it says something about whether this country is isolated or not. I mean, one of the main issues that Syria was facing under al-Assad was that it was absolutely isolated, given the fact that the airport was not really working. But now this is different. Now the new administration can actually speak on behalf of all Syrians, because this is what they have been saying and promising, and it seems that they're working towards that in a positive way. One Syria for all Syrians. This is the idea. And of course, now they have an airport. They can receive and welcome delegations from across the globe. They can actually send delegations, officials, because we know, for example, that Asad al-Shaybani, the foreign minister of the new administration in Syria, is planning to head a delegation and go to different countries, and this time not just Türkiye or UAE. He's actually planning to go to Europe. So that's one more thing. He has been in Davos recently, of course, yesterday, but again, this is significant. Now they can actually go through their own airport, instead of going through Türkiye or Lebanon. So this is actually a very important indication that the world, not just Türkiye, but the entire world, is beginning to somehow lift sanctions. Of course, we are still seeing, how important it is for Syrians to have the economic sanctions lifted. But this is definitely a step in the right direction. And even the economic sanctions will be lifted very soon, according to what we have been seeing and hearing, not just from Syrian officials, but also from European and Arab countries. That's the thing. We have to understand that maybe we will see a significant change in this regard in January 27, which is happening really soon when the 27 European bloc meet in Brussels. And of course, we do expect to see planes going to Brussels, this time from Damascus International Airport, because, well, they do have an airport, a functional one now.
They sure do, Nizar, and we're looking at these pictures now. It seems like a number of people have alighted from the plane. No doubt there will be some sort of a ceremony officially welcoming this flight to the Syrian capital. And you mentioned there that the Syrian foreign minister was just in Davos recently talking about reopening to the world, re-establishing diplomatic relations with the world. But as you say, he also talked about the issue of sanctions and the need to have those lifted in order to really kickstart the rebuilding process of Syria. And we know the Turkish government has been calling for that as well. Tell us more about Ankara's role in encouraging the international community to normalize relations with Syria.
Well, obviously, Turkey is playing a key role in all of this, because we have to understand that Turkey was not just a country that hosted and stood by the Syrian people for 14 years. It's actually bordering Syria. They have mutual interests in terms of threats coming from terror groups like the YPJ. They have interests in terms of resources, natural resources. They have interests in terms of the long historic ties between the two people, and this has only been hampered during the past 14 years because of al-Assad regime. And now this is a good opportunity for both countries to exchange gifts, to actually help each other, especially Turkey helping Syria, because we have to understand that Syrian people have said it repeatedly, even the new administration, they definitely need the help of Turkey, not just as a neighboring country, but also as a good country that has always helped Syrians, and they hope that this will continue. This has been, circulated even here within the new Syrian administration. We've heard reassurances from Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, from President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and of course we can actually see the meetings here, even in terms of the airport again. For example, this plane has also the head of TICA, who's planning certain visits here in Damascus and in the countryside of Damascus because of the reconstruction needs, the Syrian reconstruction needs. We have to understand that many parts of the countryside of Damascus is actually in ruins. I've seen that. We've seen that. We filmed it repeatedly. So it's not just the northern parts of Syria that have been devastated because of al-Assad regime and the bombing during the past 14 years. Even Damascus itself has areas like this. They don't have an infrastructure in many parts of the city. There's the fuel problem. There's the water crisis here, and that's why part of the plan that the Turkish officials have here in Damascus for today, for example, is visiting some of the water and power plants in the countryside of Damascus. This is something that will be discussed. We have spoken to the coordinator of TICA here in Damascus. Obviously, they're planning to open their own office here, their own branch in Syria, because they understand that this is a lasting demand for Syrians. This isn't something temporary. Syria will definitely, sadly, require years to fully recover. And of course, Turkey is going to play a huge role in all of this. Not just Turkey, but the entire world. And this takes us again, Oscar, to the idea of lifting economic sanctions and how important that is. Not just in terms of reconstruction, but also in terms of the daily lives of Syrians. For example, the value of the Syrian pound is still very low. The living cost is beyond bearable for most Syrians here because, under al-Assad, the average salary for a Syrian civil servant was $30 to $50 a month, which is equivalent to more than 600,000 Syrian pounds. So they cannot afford to make ends meet, and even if they do get that sort of salary, it's not enough to buy 2 meals. So the question that is always raised here in Syria, how are these people surviving? In fact, how have they been surviving for the past 14 years? They definitely need help from everyone, Turkey to start with, and of course all Arab countries, and that's why the aid is still arriving in Syria. By the way, this airport has been used for the delivery of aid. During the past 4 to 5 weeks, we've seen at least 10 different aid convoys coming from Qatar, more than 5 coming from Kuwait, some from Jordan, some of course from Türkiye as always. And that's the thing, this is something huge, and that's why the airport is in itself something very huge, because it's not just a means of delivering aid, it's actually a sign that Syria is once again a country recognized by the entire world, not isolated, having good relations with neighboring countries, with the entire world, and hopefully this will lead to lifting economic sanctions and rebuilding a country, because this is in fact what they are doing. They are indeed rebuilding a country from scratch.
Okay, Nizar Sadawi, thank you for that. Do stay with us. I want to bring in our correspondent Claire Harriott now, who joins me here in the studio. Hi there, Claire. You were at Istanbul airport this morning as Turkish Airlines 846 prepared to take off from Istanbul to Damascus, a significant moment. We heard there earlier from some of the passengers, one of whom had said she really couldn't believe that this was happening. She was a Syrian refugee who'd been here for many years. Can you tell us more about the impact this will have on the Syrian diaspora, not only in Türkiye, but in other parts of the world?
Well, indeed. I mean, it's another route now that's open, another feasible route for people to return to Syria and investigate whether rebuilding their life there is going to be feasible. Being in Istanbul airport this morning, it was really interesting to look at the departure board and see 846 listed along with all the other international departures. It was listed after a flight to Algiers and ahead of a flight to Turin. So that really kind of normalised the idea of flights going to Damascus. And of course, at the beginning of last month, you could not have conceived of the idea of seeing Damascus listed on that board like any other regular city. So seeing that was really quite interesting. Of course, there's many countries that are still advising their citizens not to travel to Syria, but seeing Turkey is obviously not one of them, and it's re-established its route from Istanbul to Damascus, and that's part of the message here that it's very symbolic to see this aircraft taking off this morning, the Turkish flag carrier going to Damascus with about 300 people on board, Boeing 777-300. And so that's part of the message being that Syria is open, it wants to rebuild, it wants those sanctions lifted so that it can start the reconstruction of the country. And of course, last month, the Turkish Infrastructure and Transport Minister announced a detailed plan of how Turkey was wanting to assist in that endeavour, and infrastructure for airports is one of those aspects. There are 5 airports in Syria. They're still using 1990s technology. The runways are not up to standard. They will need significant infrastructure and expertise, and Turkey is one of the countries that can deliver that. We saw from our colleagues who are on board the flight, who we'll be hearing from shortly, that at the gate when the flight was announced, there was a cheer from the people who were waiting to board. We saw them with the flags. We heard from some of the people boarding. I'm looking forward to hearing what our colleagues say about when the flight landed, if there was a cheer when it landed, a cheer when it took off. People are really happy to be able to consider building their lives again in Syria. The flight was scheduled to leave at 9 o'clock local time, that's 6 GMT. It was delayed, we think, due to fog. It was really very foggy at Istanbul this morning. It took off at 9:56, but really, what's 56 minutes when you've been waiting 13 years?
That's right, and Istanbul, of course, is a global hub for aviation. Many millions of passengers travel through Istanbul airport each year. We heard Nizar say that the resumption of aerial connections is crucial for a number of reasons, including for Syria's economy. Now, potentially, we could see tourism be one sector of the Syrian economy that's revived as airlines like Turkish Airlines resume flights to the country.
Yes, indeed. And what they're going to need to be able to have the reality match the ambition is significant infrastructure investment, significant expertise, probably from overseas, like countries like Türkiye, like the plan that Turkey announced in December to help aid Syria in rebuilding its infrastructure. It's not just airports, it's roads, it's bridges, it's telecommunications. So significant investment will be needed to bring Syria back in, to normalise the country, and also to have its people return. And so clearly, the best way in and out of Syria is through the airports. And so we've seen this resumption of flights from Istanbul. The airline is saying that there will be 3 flights a week to start from Istanbul on Sunday, Monday and Thursday. So the idea of a long weekend in Syria to go out on a Thursday and back on a Monday is something that people want, but they are a long way from that still, and they need significant assistance in order to get there.
Yes, and this follows a lot of diplomatic movements as well. We saw last week the reopening of the Turkish consulate in Aleppo, and that followed the reopening of Türkiye's embassy in Damascus. So clearly this is significant also for diplomatic relations between Syria and the rest of the world as well, because now diplomats from across the globe will have an easier time in the country. Tell us about the impact this might have for Syria in terms of re-establishing those relations with much of the rest of the world after years of isolation.
Yes, well, Syria has been isolated for a long time because of the Assad regime, which obviously now fell last month. Having routes into Syria, feasible routes with infrastructure, through the airports, perhaps even more airports, it's all to the good. It's all part of the same end goal, which is the normalization and bringing Syria back into the fold, and seeing major countries in the region like Türkiye expanding, reintroducing flights to Syria will only help with that. And of course, there was a Syrian delegation that came to Ankara last week, and part of what they were speaking about was the lifting of sanctions, because the rebuilding, the argument goes, can't happen while those sanctions that were in place for the former regime are still in position. So obviously the interim Syrian government is advocating strongly for the lifting of those sanctions, as is the Turkish government. So yes, all the eyes of the world are now on Syria and how it rebuilds, because a peaceful Syria can only mean good things for the region.
The eyes of the world also on the new Trump administration as well, because we're yet to see anything definitive emerge from the new president, Donald Trump, vis-a-vis what he views Syria, or how he views Syria. We know that the US has been a partner in the past for the country, but what do you anticipate in terms of the new Trump administration when it comes to Syria? Will they be looking to normalise relations as quickly as some other countries have as well? Well,
that's really one of the big unknowns. As you say, we have only just started US President Donald Trump's second administration. Just when this happened, when the fall of the Assad regime happened, it was the twilight weeks of the Biden administration. So that is one of the really big unknowns, is what direction President Trump will take US policy as regards Syria in. And it's something that analysts are watching keenly, and governments around the world are watching to see how this dynamic will play out in the coming weeks and months.
Yes, and you mentioned the current state of the airports in Syria. We know that because of that isolation under the Assad regime, frankly, that infrastructure hasn't been able to keep up with the times, and nearly all of the world's carriers ceased operations to the country for almost a decade now. Do you anticipate that other airlines will follow Turkish Airlines' lead and start to resume flights to Syria now that they see it can be done?
I mean, it's highly possible. I mean, Qatar Airways has also resumed its flights as well. So that's Qatar, that's Turkish Airlines, these major carriers that have massive hub airports that are connecting airports. So this is a feasible route now for people to arrive initially in Damascus. You mentioned there also Aleppo airport. But yes, it is going to take significant infrastructure investment. As I say, the computer technology that they're using is from the 1990s. The planes are getting much bigger now. The runway will have to be extended to be able to cope with these large aircraft. Of course, the aircraft that we saw landing this morning is a 777, which is certainly big, but they need to have major work done on the runways to be able to facilitate that. But what it shows when Turkish Airlines are flying its aircraft in Qatar as well, that there is opportunity for other airlines as well to bring passengers into Syria.
Okay, Claire Harriott, thanks so much for that. Now let's hear from our Bera Karaman, who was on board the plane headed from Istanbul to Damascus.
Well, this is the first flight going from Istanbul to Damascus after 13 years, marking a historic moment for both countries and, of course, for the Syrian people. With the start of the Syrian civil war back in 2011, diplomatic relations between Türkiye and Syria were cut off, and these flights were halted for more than a decade. But, of course, Türkiye has always been on the forefront in supporting the Syrian people. Now, these passengers are around 300 people, and they include Turks and Syrians that are excited as they witness this historic moment. We also have seen families with their children that have never been to Syria since the conflict broke out in Syria. We can also say that Türkiye is one of the leading transit centers in the world, and these flights are expected to operate 3 times in a week. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has also stated that Türkiye will continue its efforts to establish peace, stability and security in Syria.
That was Bera Karaman on board TK Flight 846 from Istanbul to Damascus. Let's go back to our correspondent Claire Herriot, who joins us in the studio. Claire, this flight was almost 14 years in the making because, of course, Turkish Airlines suspended those flights when war broke out in Syria almost 14 years ago. It it came as a result of the severing of those diplomatic ties. Many of those other countries around the world followed suit as well. But now that we see the first of hopefully many flights to resume to Syria, tell us more about the impact that this could ultimately have on the broader economy, because as we've been reporting since the fall of the Assad regime, many challenges remain for Syria, including reviving the war-torn economy. So what impact can the resumption of flights have on rebuilding the country's economy?
I mean, it's a game changer. You can get people and equipment in more easily when you have feasible working airports. There are 5 airports in Syria. We've seen Damascus up and running, Aleppo as well. There was a test flight last month from Damascus to Aleppo, although that was done really under the pilots initiative. They didn't have much technological support for that. It was a test flight, as I say. In terms of opening, obviously, there is a symbolic element to this. Seeing an aircraft land, the Turkish flag carrier, that's a highly relatable moment for anyone watching in terms of bringing Syria back into the fold, in terms of the normalization of the country, and just the ease with which people can return to Syria to investigate whether it's feasible to rebuild their lives in what has been an absolutely shattered country following the civil war and the fall of the Assad regime. What Turkey announced a couple of months ago was a programme in which Syrians in Turkey one person per family, could return, kind of like fact-finding, investigating, and be able to come back into the country, back into Türkiye, to their families, but allowing people that flexibility. And that's something that many analysts were saying that other governments could take note, because there has obviously been large numbers of Syrians coming to countries like, say, for example, in Europe. That has resulted in European governments and societies struggling with that. And so the Syrians who left the country did so under duress. They didn't want to have to leave their homes, and now people want to try and return. So seeing a potential connecting flight through Istanbul is a highly attractive way to get back to Syria. I think that many people in the Syrian diaspora are really keen to get home, to rebuild their country, and having major airlines being open again is an opportunity both for the airlines and for the people that benefit from that route.
Okay, Claire Herriot, thanks so much for that. Let's return now to our correspondent Nizar Sadawi, who's standing by for us in Damascus. Hi again, Nizar. Let's following on from Claire's point there. We know Türkiye has hosted more than 3 million Syrian refugees over the year, many of whom would be interested in thinking about returning to their homeland. And now that there is this direct flight from Istanbul to Damascus, that perhaps is more possible for them. Tell us more about the impact that this could have on the Turkish diaspora, on the Syrian diaspora rather, currently in Türkiye.
Actually, let me just start by saying that it's not just about returning to the country, because even visiting the country shortly was something not possible for most Syrians, if not all of them, especially the ones in Turkey. What I witnessed during the past few minutes was absolutely incredible. I've met just about 5 or 6 Syrians who told me they will return to Turkey again in the very same day today. And I said, why are you here if it's just 2-3 hours? And they said, we wanted to breathe the air of Sham, the air of Damascus. This is how incredible this is. It's absolutely overwhelming for all Syrians here. This is the country, and they haven't been able to breathe this air or to even see it, not even from distance, for the past decade or so, for most of them. I mean, the children who were born during the past 14, even 17, 18 minutes, they can't even remember what it used to look like. This is the thing. That's why we have been trying to understand why people are coming here. And of course, it's going to become even better in the next few days. Look, just look at this scene. This is how happy they are. I mean, everyone's using their phones. They're recording videos for social media. They're talking about it. They're waiting to see loved ones, because most of these people, they already have relatives in Syria, ones who were living under al-Assad regime, and they were not even able to stay in contact with them. That's a reality. I've seen many people here who told me they were even afraid of using social media to talk about what was happening in Syria. They were afraid of using any sort of telecommunication means just to stay in contact with the country. They couldn't even speak on the phone with most of their relatives here in Syria because of al-Assad regime. Now, this is definitely a new era for the country and definitely for its people. This is a new chapter in what they call, what they affirm, that will be one Syria for all Syrians.
And Nizar, it is incredible, isn't it, how quickly this flight has resumed after the fall of the Assad regime. It's barely been a month since the fall of Bashar al-Assad, and now we're seeing scenes like where you are, of normalization in an airport, scenes that many people, including the Syrians themselves, thought was impossible a little over a month ago. This is hopefully going to be the start of a further normalization or return to normalcy throughout the country, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They have officially and socially wise re-established perfect relation with the most important country for Syrians, which is neighboring Türkiye. And this is only one step in the right direction, because they're aiming to do the same with the entire world. They don't have any problem with anyone. This is what they're saying, except that they are reassuring the Syrian people that they will not allow any foreign powers to interfere again or to take control of what is right only for Syrian people. So this is a very huge moment for all people here. And again, I'm telling you, many Syrians who were on that plane, on that Turkish Airlines plane, are just here to breathe the air in Damascus. And many of them are planning to come again, even possibly in the sense that they will return to their country. But of course, we have to understand that this is very challenging. It's not an easy thing to do for most Syrians, because Syria lacks infrastructure. It's still facing challenges in terms of the economic sanctions. So many people have actually built lives. We have to keep this on mind. They had built lives outside, and it's just not easy to drop everything behind and come here. But this is what they're aiming to do. They're just working on it. This is what most people here that we have met told us. And for a start, which is very significant, now they can actually come and visit their country. They can talk to their people. They can make sure that their relatives, the ones who were trapped under al-Assad regime in Syria, are okay. They can actually have family reunions inside their country instead of having it in the diaspora, because most Syrians have been living in diaspora. I mean, half the population was actually forced out of their country. That's not easy.
Okay, Nizar Sadawi, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for bringing us the latest there from Damascus.